Hello, hello. I want you to imagine an everyday standard classroom, whatever that looks like to you in America. All right, try to envision what that looks like. Feel free to respond back to me. Where is the teacher standing? The front. Excellent. In what way are the students' desks organized? Lines, rows, like a grid, right? Fantastic. So imagine this setup, and then imagine the teacher coming to the front of the room, the knower of all information that they will impart upon the students. The students are expected to interpret that. They're receptacles, depositories of information even. They're supposed to analyze, interpret that, spit it back out via tests, via quizzes, what have you. I want to explore a counter-narrative with this. An example of a counter-narrative to the banking model and a room structure such as this one would be culturally relevant pedagogy. Shout out to Dr. Gloria Letts and Billings doing incredible work with this. Here are 3 components, requirements that you need to have a culturally responsive classroom. Student perspectives and histories need to be present. You cannot isolate home experiences and school experiences. You can't just shut off everything that you have at the door of that classroom. That's not authentic and that's not genuine. That's detrimental to the classroom. If you do that, if you allow the perspectives and histories and the inner narratives and truths of the students to be present, you foster cultural integrity, which some textbooks may lack. Lastly, in doing this, social and political consciousness is benefited, all of these students. And we're going to get into that a little bit further, but it's time for some hip-hop, all right? What is hip-hop? There are several elements to hip-hop, one of them being emceeing. Right? Who has the stage? Who has the microphone? Who has the attention of the audience? DJing, instrumentation, the breaks, all right? It's an art form. As are b-boying and b-girling, right? Very unique, complex, sophisticated forms of dance. And lastly, graffiti. I want you to take a look at that picture. That is such a beautiful graffiti tag, isn't it? There's also a 5th element to hip-hop. KRS-One would describe it as the study of self-transformation and the pursuit of self-expression. Let's call that knowledge of self. Does it sound like knowledge of self would fit within a paradigm of culturally responsive pedagogy? I would think so. Let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about some subjects in the classroom that we could use hip-hop. Starting with hip-hop science. Okay? Science genius battles, put on in part by GZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. Okay? What happens is students from all across the nation have the opportunity to submit raps that focus on science terminology. All right? This young gentleman in 2013 decided to rap about work and kinetic energy, and he won. As a result, he got to hang out with GZA in his studio, eat a whole bunch of pizza, he got some shoes, it was great. But in addition to that, he remembers the lyrics that he wrote, and he'll have that for a long time. He learned something, and he got to teach others, right? I think it's safe to say that there are several classrooms across the nation where in a science class you have a textbook and you have a worksheet. And that worksheet is missing a couple words from that textbook, from a page, and you're supposed to fill in the blank. Or you're just supposed to write down the definition, memorize it, and squeak by. Students aren't remembering that. They're really not. At Beloit College, I actually had the opportunity in my biology class to write a rap about a biological term. And I can tell you, I still remember from 4 years ago to this day, that cytoskeletons, if you can't tell, are networks of protein fibers in the cell. I'm really bad at science, okay? Social sciences, I like those. But I remembered that. That stuck with me. There are memory cues that are extremely powerful within hip-hop, and we need to be taking advantage of that as educators. Hip-hop math. Math is tough too, right? A lot of students are struggling with math. A lot of the word problems aren't very engaging. Peter has 7 pencils, you have 12 marbles. What if we decided that you are Kendrick Lamar's tour manager, or merchandise expert, or booking agent? We could have a lot of problems, word problems, that are developed to engage students. They can get involved, realize that these are practical skills that exist in the workforce. We could possibly motivate them to want to go into the field of math and not just try and get by. Okay, you're ready for this one, right? Gym class. I'm going to show you something that I was required to do during my education in our dance classes in gym, when we had our dance unit, right? Some pretty hip stuff happening here. 199 years ago. This is the waltz. We actually had a unit where we learned the waltz, we learned the polka, square dancing, line dancing. Seriously? This is what, I'm just gonna leave this here. I think it's pretty shocking. Like, this was cool in 1816. This is the Dougie here, this guy's doing the Dougie. That's almost already outdated. Because hip hop is at the forefront of innovation. They push culture forward. You're already behind with the times if you're just learning what the Dougie is, because there are new moves out there. Okay? So we could do 199 years ago, we could do 4 years ago, 1 year ago, and what's next in the future. Students will be certainly more engaged to participate in this, I would argue. HipHop Art. Shout out to Kendesi School in Atlanta, Georgia, and Dr. Bettina Love. I have so much respect for her. Her students made this mural in honor of Trayvon Martin. They also wrote a rap in response to the tragedy and processing and reflecting on how they fit within that tragedy. So for the negative stigmas that graffiti receives, here it is at work through the lens of social justice. Hip-hop lyrics as texts. You can do this. They deserve to be treated as such. And I'm going to share with you a verse that I wrote. Here's some terms that you can be cognizant of as I'm going through it, and then we'll reflect on it in a minute. Once you hit about middle school, having a dream's only a little cool. Pressure gets to riddle you. Stereotypes make merry-go nights and they riddle you. Judging off the color of your skin when they belittle you. You're taking that as truthful info and fruitful info and letting that defect and affect what you can live for. When that mental connection is set, it's seeming sinful if you're going against it, so dreams pile up by the binful. The garbage man is feeling guilty, having to throw away those aspirations, allowing the filthy to infiltrate the households he drives by every weekend. Words cut like knives and the machete speaking. It's already steep when trying to set out for your dreams and go accomplish. It's even harder yet when you lack an accomplice. It's even harder yet when you step and you trudge through the tears, sweat, and blood, but they're set to judge and mock this. High school is the epitome of its perpetuation. Everybody's caught up on their reputation. All the fakeness and the gimmicks are the statements of the timid, had a vision, never lived in protecting their image. Young dreams hanging up with their hopes. Their hopes are on their necks where they've set up their ropes. But before the stool kick can understand, it's cool to get in with the opposite. So keep your soul to it and stay on top of it. Okay, so that's just one verse. It takes about a minute. You can print it out, distribute it, and you can go through lists if you want to. Sociologically, you could talk about what pressures are, stereotypes, perpetuation. What are some things that are negatively perpetuated within classroom spaces? You can talk about the garbage man and get into literary devices. You could talk about metaphor, the opposite. What does it mean to be the opposite? What is normativity? How is that harmful? Okay, this can open up an expansive amount of possibilities, and students are willing to engage with this work. Beloit College no longer requires that you submit your ACT scores. It's optional, okay? And a lot of colleges and institutions are adopting this, right? So what becomes important? Your personal essay definitely is, okay? And you can use personal narrative writing through hip-hop. What is hip-hop? If you're rapping, vast majority of the time, you're telling a narrative, some sort of inner truth that you're speaking to. And that might be a little bit less intimidating than saying, we're going to write an essay today, saying, we're going to write a rap today. We're going to write a story about us. So that way they can take that to the colleges and universities and say, this is me, this is why I should be here, why I matter, why you need me as an asset to this college. Imagine a conflict between two people in a classroom, right? And there have been a few instances where this has happened. Educators have taken them aside and said, you know what, we're going to do slam poems about this. You're going to put this into writing. You're going to articulate your thoughts and feelings, and you can go ahead and spit your rhymes, your poems, and we'll reflect on it. And what happened is the students sat down, did it, and there was some sort of conflict resolution, all right? They humanized one another. They got to express their emotion, and as a result, there was a strengthening relationship there that diffused the situation. Dissecting social pressures. I want to shout out to Washburn High School's Black Box Theater program and the queen herself, Crystal Spring, who organizes it all. Absolutely fantastic. Now, there was a 14-year-old student who was responding to one of Ms. Spring's prompts, today I stand for or today I stand against. And he chose to stand against the social pressures that existed around him. And I will always remember this line that he said. He said, "Too much pressure can make anybody break. I can never get a chance to just say wait." Okay? If we use a banking model paradigm and we're just feeding students information, how are we going to uncover this? And by the off chance that this is uncovered, what are we going to do with this information? We broke off into groups. We talked about social pressures, what that meant in high school. And believe it or not, those opening lines to his poem became the opening lines to the entire theater production's performance. His genius was unlocked, just as many students are waiting to have their geniuses unlocked. So what have other scholars and teachers said about this? Students are fighting for attention and participation. Wouldn't that be a shame, to be in a classroom and have everyone engaged and trying to take up too much time discussing things? Navigating racial divides and discovering academic literacy. Those sound like two critical components of functioning effectively in an ever-changing diverse society. And lastly, stimulating imagination and emotion through storytelling. And not only through storytelling, but in interpreting stories, hearing what other people's truths are. And that fosters empathy. How important is empathy today? How many conversations are ruined because of a lack of empathy? There's too much apathy. Well, here's a counter-narrative, and it's fostered through the vein of hip-hop. Here's some photos of Black Box Theater. Okay? Top left, it says Black Box. It's tagged, it says Black Box. And there's another side of that wall that says Safe Space. The students decided that safe space should be tagged within their walls. They get it. I talked about the structure of the classroom. They begin every single morning circling up into a cipher. Okay, a cipher is a circle. The teacher is in the cipher. All the teachers are in the cipher, actually. It's a trick sentence because all the students are treated as teachers because they have knowledge to share. So everyone is learning collaboratively and organically with one another. There are a lot of dance battles that went down, a lot of freestyles, a lot of b-boying, b-girling, extremely supportive. Beatboxing that accompanied their spoken word pieces, and that's what drove a lot of their dialogue when they were presenting their performances. So we're supposed to keep slide text short, usually in presentations. I'm not going to do that because this is extremely important, and I want you to take a minute or two to look over these issues. This is what the students decided to talk about and present on. This wasn't the teacher saying, today we are going to talk about X, Y, Z. The teacher said, what do you see that isn't right? What do you stand for? Where do you come from? What bothers you? What do you want to see changed? 14 to 18-year-old students came up with this list. This is a very sophisticated list. You could spend units and units and units on these topics. They get it. All of these students have their geniuses waiting to be unlocked, and they deserve that. They deserve a model that will accommodate to that. So to end here, I think it's important that we fast forward to now. I think there are a lot of educational systems that are stuck in the past. Okay? What happens if we fast forward to the now, and we incorporate culturally relevant pedagogy through the vein of hip-hop? Especially with the focus on social justice. What does that look like? I think it sounds like a fantastic opportunity that we must take advantage of if we want our students to succeed. When I say we need, you say hip-hop. We need. Hip-hop. We need. Hip-hop. Thank you.